Hey guys, and welcome to Should You Buy It, where all we do is talk a little bit about the game and tell you whether or not we think it's worth the cost. In this episode, we'll be playing Hell Let Loose, the World War II tactical FPS shooter game where you can play on both sides of the war in a battle with up to 100 players in a single lobby. The first question that we always cover whenever we make one of these videos is what stage of development is the game currently in? In this case, Hell Let Loose is already in full release and available on PC as well as some consoles for roughly $40. Now, if you guys want to save money on games, you should check out Humble Bundle in the description below. Humble Bundle will not only help to give you a discount on games sometimes, but will also help charity and support this channel. Everything you purchase on Humble Bundle will go towards helping a charity, helping our channel, and giving you some kind of a discount if there's a discount running on that game, which they have tons of discounts that Steam does not all the time. And again, if you want to save money, just check out Humble Bundle down below by clicking the link. So what exactly is Hell Let Loose? Well, Hell Let Loose is a World War II shooter game that attempts to make you actually feel like you're in World War II. It does this through a few key points such as strategic combat, in-depth environments, and a variety of different game modes. First up, let's talk about the combat itself, as it's the main thing you'll be doing within the game, so it's probably the thing you're going to care the most about. At the start of each game of Hell Let Loose, you'll be able to choose between one of three different squad types. These are the infantry, vehicle, and recon squads. The infantry squad is a squad made up of up to 6 players and has a wide variety of playable roles, such as the machine gunner, rifleman, assault, medic, and much more. Each class has its own specific loadout and thing that they specialize in doing. For an example, the machine gunner is specialized in putting down suppressive fire in order to help the rest of your team advance forward. Infantry is also the type of squad that the majority players on your team will be using, so this means you'll have roughly 40 players playing infantry and the other 10 playing some of the other squad options. Next up, let's talk about the vehicle squad, which contains 2 different classes in it. Both of these are kind of lackluster and are basically just your most generic soldier that is specifically made to help support a vehicle or be in the vehicle itself. And when I say vehicle, what I really mean is tanks. And in order to get a tank, you'll have to have it called in by your team's commander. Now, these tanks can be an absolutely destructive force when they're supported by infantry to prevent flanking around them, as they can be taken out with just a few rockets and a couple of shots from another enemy artillery or tank or anything else explosive really. However, enemy small arms fire such as pistols, rifles, and any form of machine gun is not going to do anything to these, so they can absolutely decimate when on the battlefield if you have that support from your team. Now finally is the recon squad, which essentially are just your sniper squadrons and are used to help pinpoint different spots for enemies around the map in the backlines. I'm not really going to go into depth here as these are pretty straightforward. You get a sniper rifle, you flank around them, you can point out things for your team and stuff like that. Throughout your time fighting in Hell Let Loose though, you'll be immersed into the World War II brutal combat of men just running at each other and being mowed down by enemy machine gunners or riflemen just waiting in trenches. I mean, even the different environments that you'll experience within the game are all based on real World War II locations, such as Omaha Beach, where the Allies must make their landing on a D-Day invasion and push across a wide open piece of land. The game even can get to the point that when you're playing something like the Germans, for instance, and you win, it's almost kind of a bad feeling as you know you've just annihilated an insane amount of American soldiers in doing so. Granted, it's a video game, so it doesn't really feel that bad, but there were times where I was like, ugh, that felt kind of brutal as I mowed down enemies on the beach of Normandy. To be honest, there's just something about seeing a body being blown to bits in front of you that brings your mind into the game and makes you feel like you're actually there. To help immerse you even further into the game, as well as to help you engage in different ways of combat, the game presents you with 2 main playable game modes. The first one of these game modes is offensive. This game mode has one team pushing against another team, trying to capture a point within a 30-minute time period in order to progress to the following point. If they do manage to capture a point within that 30-minute time period, it then also resets the timer while also giving them that next point to then push. Now, the second game mode that's currently available in Hell Let Loose seems to be a bit more popular, and that is Warfare, which is essentially a push and pull style game mode where each team is trying to simultaneously attack and defend 2 different points in order to push back the enemy team and win the game. Needless to say, if you decide to play something like the offensive game mode on the beaches of Normandy, then it's going to be one hell of a bloodbath. Alrighty, now let's start the pros and cons section of the video. And first up for the pros is the tactical but playable nature of this game. What I mean here is that sometimes when you play games like Arma or Squad for an example, the game can actually be so tactical sometimes and realistic that it starts to remove a bit of the fun. Hell Let Loose still has that extremely tactical nature, as you won't be running around like it's Call of Duty or anything, but it doesn't take it so far that it starts to remove the fun out of the game. Next up is the sense of immersion. While Hell Let Loose can be a bit arcadey at times, it doesn't take away from the actual feeling of being in the World War II experience. This means that whether you're driving a tank or you're running across a field, the game still feels immersive and helps to sell you on that sense of going back into the meat grinder once again to help with the war effort. Now, the last pro I have for you guys today is the sense of progression. This is something that Squad and Arma and things like that really just miss out on, and I understand why, so some of you may not like having it, but what this means is that there is going to be an element of progression, and as you level up a class, you'll unlock more weapons to use as that class, so you'll actually be able to be more effective the next time you play it. Again, this is something that some players hate in games and something that some players love. In my experience, the majority of players like having something to progress towards, and that's why I've put it as a pro here, as it's also something that I personally enjoy. Now for the cons. And first up for the cons is that the vehicle combat and controls just feel wonky and strange. For an example, whenever you're in a vehicle and you're driving, you'll actually have to use a stick shift sometimes in order to shift gears and be able to drive properly, whereas if you're also using the cannon on a tank for an example, you'll have to use WASD, in other words WASD, in order to aim your cannon. This just feels unnatural on PC, and it might be better on console or whenever you're using a controller, but personally I really dislike having this. This also doesn't just apply to vehicles, as when I was using my bipod as a machine gunner, sometimes I had to go ahead and open up that bipod and then it would teleport me back a few inches, which just felt weird and wonky and like it wasn't really coded that well. Next is that spawn camping is definitely a problem. Yes, this can be avoided to a certain amount with spawns being placed in good spots, but at the end of the day, spawn camping is definitely a thing, and it is pretty brutal, as soon as you spawn in, you'll get mowed down and then have to wait another 30 to 40 seconds before you can spawn in again, which is just not fun for anybody. Personally, I feel this could be easily fixed by doing what Squad does and not allowing you to spawn in if there's an enemy player too close by. Finally, is that the game uses a supply type system where the commander must spawn you in items or vehicles if you want to use them. This can be extremely frustrating, as if you're playing a tank crew, you can just be sitting there kind of standing around talking, waiting for the commander to spawn you in a tank, where otherwise you could actually be playing the game, doing something, and waiting for maybe a tank to spawn in naturally if that was the mechanic they had done instead. In other words, I really think they need to take this whole mechanic of asking a commander to spawn you in a tank out of the game and simply apply a mechanic that makes it so tanks spawn on a default timer, or maybe that timer is longer or shorter depending on how many points you control. So now it's time for the rating for the game, and when we rate games, we want to get 1 hour of enjoyment out of every $1 that the game costs. So for this game in particular, in Hell Let Loose, we would want to get roughly 40 hours of enjoyment out of the $40 cost of the game. And after putting a ton of hours into this game, we give it 7 out of 10 potatoes. Hell Let Loose is a game that will definitely scratch your World War II gaming itch if that's something you're feeling. In other words, if you like the sound of going over a wall just to get mowed down by a machine gun and then waiting 30 seconds to respawn, then look no further, as this game definitely delivers. Of course, you can be the one being the machine gunner in situations if you're smart and outplay your opponents, as well as coordinate with your team. However, doing this with randoms can be a bit of a struggle unless you're extremely careful. The game is tactical and fun to play nonetheless though, which is why we feel that Hell Let Loose is more than likely worth the cost. Before you guys go, I do want to give you a quick thank you for watching the video. Like it if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and share if you've got some friends that might be interested. Either way, I want to give a big shout out to our Platinum Above channel members, which currently include Caustic FPV, Jonathan S, Gerald89, AZ Blackbird, and Jim Phillips. Thank you all so much for watching once again. I'm Game Advisor, and I'll see you in the next one.